Today we are with Gregory from Australia. Thanks for listening. Hi, Gregory. So can you explain to us what you're currently doing? So you have many years of experience in the police, army, and now you're working as a freelancer. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Good morning, Aurelien. Nice to speak with you. I work as a consultant and I help people bring their best work into the world. I do that by providing a range of advice on business startups, on communication in particular, which is one of my strengths, and on information management.
So can you help us go through one particular case, for instance, one of the things you did with your client, and how you help this particular person?
Sure. I'm going to go completely out of left field. Before we kicked off, Aurelien and I were talking about my military experience. But one of the best examples I can give is how to provide a value add with information was many years ago when I had left my work with the intelligence sector and I'd been traveling around and working as a night manager in a hostel, of all places. And one of the guests that came in there, I recognized from my time working in Intel as a member of a slavery ring. I was able to, as a night manager, get lots of time. I was able to use that time before the morning handoff to do some research on him, prepare a file using some of the contacts that I still had in the industry. And so when the manager came in the morning, I said, this is who the bloke is. This is what he does. These are all his friends. Suggest you pass it round to the other hostels in the area so we know who these people are and they can be removed quietly and the police informed. That was a completely out of left field value add by being not only having the information from my previous role, but still having access to the people with the right information to help me pass that information on.
So what would you say the big difference between the private sector and the army and the police? I mean, obviously you don't have the same tools, right?
Yeah, obviously there's some difference in the tools, which I won't go into, but a lot of the big difference actually is in structure, and that's both a good and a bad thing. For example, in crisis communications, the military is very good at it and practice it on a regular basis. There's a playbook, everyone uses that, and that playbook is refined through constant practice. So everyone knows what their jobs are in any given situation. Just as it would for a firefight, a team would rehearse what they do, just like a football team, I guess, would rehearse what they do. And a communications and information management team would do the same. I found in the private sector that is not as often the case, in that people come from many different backgrounds, have different levels of training and different experiences, and will come in, and it can be difficult sometimes to get everyone singing from the same song sheet. In the military in particular, everyone marches in lockstep and can work very efficiently as a team because everyone knows the same basic procedures. That can have some disadvantages. For example, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you've been trained to do everything in one particular way, having to do it in a different circumstance because of the situation has changed can be difficult to adjust. And in that, I've found the private sector sometimes has the leap ahead on the military. That being said, I was fortunate enough to do a very small amount of work with some of the special operations teams, and they are very flexible and embrace quite a level playing field in terms of who has the best information, who can contribute. They're very much a flat structure, whereas most of the military is very hierarchical. That can be great for getting lots of things done quickly, but I have found that a flat structure where everyone's contribution is valued and the best idea wins, that can lead to better ideas and a stronger team effort when the environment can facilitate that. Difficult to do, but when done right, very powerful.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because if you compare with the US, where people complain because it's not flat at all, and the information is not being crossed between so many different departments. One department is not sharing the intel they have to another department. So based on your experience, that was not the case. The military, they implement a framework where people from different departments were able to share information. efficiently.
Not in every case, there, Aurelien, but when I've seen that done, it can work very, very well. And I think they're some of the best teams I've worked, some of the best operations I've worked on have been ones where there was the leadership had a very good management of when to silo information and when to have that flat structure and everyone contributes. For example, once the decision is made to go in a particular way, then silos can be very, very helpful and allow a team to focus on one thing without extraneous information coming in. That being said, if that's done all the time, then that leads to problems. I'm not sure who was it that said that insects are great at specialising and humans are great at being generalists, but I think there's a lot of truth to that.
All right. So question about the information in general. So in business, obviously, that's how we make good decision. It's for business to thrive, right? So right now with your clients, it's I assume it's to make them more successful. So
yes.
Money-wise, but in the military, sometimes it's about life and death, right?
Yes.
How do you approach information in both situations? Because obviously in one situation, I mean, you're not going to spend 1 week to verify if the information is correct, because you may do 10% growth or 15% growth because the information was not that accurate. But in the military, that's a different situation. So what is the process to verify the information?
Okay. I believe I understand what you mean. I think the same approach can apply to both military and non-military, the intelligence sector, the training, all of it. It's simply to have a plan, to know at the start why you need the information, what you need, and then to have a think about how you're going to get that information. You mentioned wanting to verify, wanting to be certain there, and that's incredibly important. How else do you know the information is valid? But there will come a point at some stage where you have to stop the research, stop finding out, and make a decision. I don't believe we'll ever know everything about a particular topic that we need to. I think that's very, very difficult, and it's very easy to always keep looking and always try and find out something more. But if we keep doing that, we'll never actually achieve anything. We'll never step off from our training. We'll never step off from our research. And knowing how to set those boundaries. Okay, at this point on Thursday morning, 11 o'clock, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to go off and do something. You need to set that time. And I think the key to success with gathering and using information comes at the very, very start when you have your plan. How will I find out information? What do I need to know and why? Once you have that plan, you can have those cutoffs in time, the deadlines for which we've learned everything we need to learn, or we learned everything we have time to learn, and now we must make a decision and act. So in the military, there's a very strict, not strict. They have guidelines to do it. There's the mission analysis comes first, and then followed by that, finding out all the information that you need, and then coming up with different plans and then testing them, and then picking one and then doing it. And there's set timelines to do that. Like the pirate code from the Pirates of the Caribbean, they are guidelines, but they are there and they can be very, very helpful. Just as in business, having a template for your communications plan is very, very helpful. The template for your strategy is good to know. So most of the time, your leadership was coming to you with a question and they set a budget in terms of time. Hey, Gregory, you have 1 week. If you don't find information in 1 week, then stop. That was the case? That's exactly it. The first part of the military planning that's done in Australia is called that mission analysis. And we would use different names in the civilian world there, but essentially it all boils down to what actually are we trying to accomplish? Why are we trying to accomplish it? What's our general guidelines? What can we do? What can't we do? And when do we need to make a decision by in order to achieve, when do we need to start doing things in order to achieve what we need to achieve by the timeline? That guidance would usually come from a commander, from someone in charge, from a CEO, from a manager, same sorts of thing. That person would be informed by their advisors, they would make their decisions, and then a team would run off and try and find the answers that they need. In a large headquarters, it might take months to do that. They might have continuously rolling plans there, and lots of information can be brought forth. If it was say, a fire team in the middle of a contact in Afghanistan, that process would still happen. It would just happen very, very quickly, and obviously with a lot less information to work with.
What would you do if you don't find anything?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
If you don't find anything, so your commander asks you a question and there's literally no information at all.
Okay, that has happened. That's when full and frank honesty needs to come into place and say, hey, we've got nothing. There's always past cases that can be leaned on for some guidance or inferred from. But if there comes a time when one cannot find the information to make a decision, you always have your values, your ethics, your principles to guide you and go from there, as we have in business. It's why we have vision statements, why we have mission statements and codes of conduct. They equate to the same thing. They give us guidance where we may not have the information that we need.
So you've been involved in the field for decades now. One of the things that changed, it's technology. So when you got started, the technology was not the same as today. How would you say this changed your work?
I think we're still evolving, not just in the military, everywhere we're still evolving. One of your previous guests mentioned a fascinating app, Crystal Knows. I'm sure it's been linked to in the past, that uses basic Briggs-Meyer personality analysis on people's LinkedIn profiles. A fantastic idea, still in its infancy, still developing. But we have society as a whole, the technology we have, we're getting better and better at creating these apps, these technological enhancements to help the way we think, the way we interact. But the military does the same. The basic principles of it I've seen relatively unchanged in how the Army operates. I recall, if I can give a bit of a worry, an instance where it's a combined operation with Army, Navy and Air Force groups, all doing some planning and so on. The Navy and the Air Force had all their wonderful bits of tech, their great devices, not quite like Tony Stark putting things up, but very much along those ball games. It's wonderful tech. The Army people, they had notepads and pens. And that wasn't a lack of access to those tools. It was a mindset. And so the Army procedures that I was taught a decade ago are very, very similar to the ones that are being taught now. Yes, the new officers now get taught extra things, but they still get taught the basics. They still have very similar tools in their back pocket, which involve pen and paper. And the Army officers at that instance were laughed at resoundingly by the Air Force officers, by the Navy Air Force officers. And there was much discussion about, sort of whose system was better, and that sort of tribalism approach that you'll see anyway. And then, of course, the tech completely failed. There was a blackout, and the Army guys all had a good laugh because their notes were all still good to go. Another instance that shows, I think, a dangerous lack that can come into was planning for a particular operation where I was fortunate enough to be on a planning team. And the operational plan was created by us to be given for approval to one of the heads in the military, high-ranking guy. And we'd spent a couple of weeks coming up with our wonderful plan. It was all singing, all dancing, and could do everything. And the night before, we needed to get this plan in a format that we could present it to this high-ranking general. And we ended up with several high-ranking officers, several mid-ranking officers, all standing around one junior lieutenant who was in his last few years at university, who was actually the best one at using PowerPoint. For all the knowledge in the room, all the experience in the room, what was required was actually some technical competency, which was lacking in the others. And to me, that I'm not sure if that was an isolated incident or just us, but the ability to be a PowerPoint ninja, to use the technology that we have in an efficient and effective way is an incredibly undervalued skill that people of my generation and older don't have or need to learn.
When you hear this type of story, so you've got those people with a lot of experience and they're struggling with PowerPoint. So when you imagine if you talk about big data, machine learning, I mean, they must be, totally foreign from those fields, which is kind of scary to hear. Because
it is. I think big data. I was looking at a couple of wonderful TED Talks last night about it all, and I'm incredibly excited by it, even though I know there's so much that I don't understand about how it works. I heard one chap talking about how he used his the big data that he uses, the analytical research similar to what you do, to come up with ways of diagnosing cancers, even though he did not have any medical knowledge himself. But he was able to train the programs into what to look for. The programs themselves are able to make inferences that hadn't even been taught to them, and were able to, I forget the exact numbers, but they were diagnosing or doing a part of the diagnosis process more than 10 times faster than a human team. And that will only improve as we go. I think what we need to do is start with ourselves, but also with our kids, teaching the technical literacy so they can understand how to use the massive amounts of information that we now and in the future will have access to.
So that's one of your observations, is that we're not ready. I mean, we're not trained at unis, schools, how to deal with new flow of information. That's one of the things you saw.
Yes, I agree. I don't think we are. I don't think our teachers are trained in it, which makes it very hard to train the kids in it. And I think in business, generally, we're still learning these things are in their infancy.
Yeah.
That being said, even though we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be inefficient, we must keep moving forward with this. How else will we learn? When you and I were first starting to learn to walk, how many times did we fall over? But we still kept doing it. And now, excellent, got this much more efficient way of getting around than crawling. I think our technology adaptation will be the same. We will make mistakes. Things will be inefficient. But if we keep going, if we keep learning, if we keep that feedback mechanism going, 10, 15 years, it will be difficult to imagine the future, but I think it will be amazing.
So I want to ask about, what do you think about the information we've got access, on the social media, newspaper? So how do you deal with all this information? Do you apply the same amount of scrutiny and making sure those are not fake news? I mean, how do you deal with information in general, coming from this background?
Understood. So I've got actually some notes here. Forgive me for looking. One of the previous guests talked about social media as bubbles, and how it can define the information that we get in, and it's restricted, filtering it through a lens. I think that will happen to all of us. I think social media, and we do that normally, but I believe our social media feeds that we construct highlight that particular bias that we have for information filtering. And I'll use an example. If a friend of mine is talking to me about cars, for example, which is not something I'm particularly interested in, there's going to be a lot of, some blank in my face. I'll hit the highlights and try and, but it's going to filter over a lot. If he was talking to me something about information management, I might focus in a little bit more. And that's just an interhuman way of filtering the information. On my social media feed, I'm not going to get information about cars because the algorithms will know, okay, Gregory won't engage with this, so we won't show it to him. But he might engage in something about AI, so let's show him something about that. We have a higher engagement rate, happy days. So I think how we create information filters using technology, using social media, highlight our own biases. Elon Musk talks about a cybernetic or third self or third layer of ourselves. He's got a good point in that we create a bubble around us using our technology, using our apps. that automatically filters the information we get through. For myself, one of your guests talked about how on her social media feed she keeps a variety of different inputs and perspectives, so she has as much as possible an unclouded filter. It's fantastic. My social media is not not nearly as noble. It's very much concentrated on these are the sorts of things I'm into, and I'll ignore that, because for me it's like reading the funny pages of the newspaper, something for entertainment. If I need information for work, I'll even go to the stage of actually setting up a VPN to effectively blank my search engine history profile and look from that fresh start. And that way I can make sure that there are fewer filters on the information that I'm getting, and each search can be as much as possible unique. Because at the end of the day, our search engine history will filter the information that we come in.
Yeah.
By doing the searches, we have created a custom profile of ourselves, which will then filter all the information coming in. So if we wish a blank search, start with a VPN, start afresh, create a whole new history based on that search.
And it's very interesting that you bring that up about privacy, because it's also a big concern when it comes to information in the 21st century. You've got all those companies collecting a lot of information on ourselves with the big data, mostly Facebook, Google, all those companies. Coming from this background, I guess you have some safeguards. You just mentioned VPN. So what else do you put in place to protect your privacy and mechanically yourself?
Okay, I don't do a lot myself to protect my privacy. I see that as a losing battle, so I'm not going to get in there. And I'm sure if I started acting in a way that...
you think it's a losing battle?
Yes, I think there's no real way to keep our internet identity private without extreme measures. So there are ways, obviously, but if I was doing that the whole time, then I'd miss out on new information about a particular product that I wanted to get. Because sometimes the advertising that comes out, that's a great idea, hadn't thought of it, I'll click to learn more. I'm happy to sacrifice some of my privacy in order to get that information. But it is a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Although I admit, yes, there are many things I don't understand and won't know. But as I understand that by giving information about myself, I am giving it to marketers who will use it to target me and give me the particular products that seem to fit my profile, such is life. What I think would be wonderful to do, if it could ever be done, is if we could decide as consumers who we're prepared to sell our information to. At the moment with, say, for example, Facebook, we give Facebook the information. Facebook gives us, interesting news and cat stories or whatever it is that we're getting. And we're giving away for free. We get something in return. Not the greatest of deals, but, such is life. If instead of us paying for a subscription, the transaction was, I'll give you this information about me, which you will sell onto advertisers. That's how social media platforms make their money. But in return for giving that information, we get a cut of a percentage of how our information is used. That, I think, would empower people and give them a little bit more ownership and control over their information.
I think, it's one of the solutions. But now the question is, does those companies want to share? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Sharing the pie.
Will they? No, I'm not entirely sure. Could they? Yes, absolutely. I don't know the numbers on what Facebook earns, but I'm sure there's a large enough pie that a slice can be sent off to the rest of us.
Yeah. So we talk about the fact that most people don't have the skills or the training to deal with information. So you mentioned lack of, the education system is not fit and designed for that. We also talk about the technology that can help. What do you think is going to be the future? Do we need to stress and really try to educate more people about the risk and how to deal with information? Or you think the solution is going to be from the tech? Basically, do you believe the tech is a solution? That's the question.
Whether the tech is a solution or not, the tech is there and will be there. So embrace the reality of the battle space, as to use an expression from the old days, and deal with it. The tech is there and it's increasing and becoming more and more part of our lives. 30 years ago, we didn't walk around with mobile phones. Now we've always got one within reach. 30 years ago, when we were some kids growing up, we'd read a book, play outside, watch the TV. If our show that we wanted to watch wasn't on when we were there, then such is life. These days, the kids can manipulate devices with a phenomenal amount of skill for their age that we would have thought beyond us at that time. Things change. We must embrace the tech. Will the tech provide solutions? Yes, absolutely. The analogy I was thinking of earlier on was in terms of reliance, or is there a danger of over-reliance on technology to process and gather information? Yes. And for example, when you were a kid and you didn't have a mobile phone on you, you remembered the phone numbers of your friends.
Correct.
Now we don't really remember phone numbers all that much because we can just type in a name into our phone or speak a name and that connection is made. Have we lost the ability to remember numbers? Maybe we're not using that muscle in the mind as much, but we've gained a lot more. Where the danger might come in, say, for example, if we have, let's look at a Fitbit, plus, something that monitors our blood toxicity, monitors our, or looks at our eating and exercise habits and advises us on how to do it better, how to be fitter, how to be healthier. Cool, great idea. What happens when we grow up on that and we start to lose the ability for ourselves to decide what's healthy and what's not? Oh, my Fitbit's told me I need to eat more green vegetables, so I'll do that. Or my Fitbit's told me I need to go for a walk, I'll do that. And if we start to, over time, lose the ability to judge for ourselves on some of these important matters, things that we do now, yes, that's a danger, but we would gain so much more. Once upon a time, as a race, we didn't write things down and we had wonderful memories. We'd remember whole books, the equivalent thereof, whole sagas that would take days to tell. We could remember them. Then we started writing things down. Sure, okay, we've lost the ability, for the most part, to be able to rattle off days worth of stories. But by writing things down, we gained a whole lot more. So while there are arguments to say, I feel that, yes, we will lose things by embracing more tech, using more apps, having this part of our information gathering and processing concepts, sure, we'll lose something. We will gain so much more. The ability at the touch of a button to learn any fact from human history, to know what's going on the other side of the world instantaneously, that's incredible. Have we lost things? Yeah, sure. It's a shame, but I think we've gained more. And I think that will continue to be the case.
Interesting. Would you be okay to share a few advice or any book you would recommend for people who want to maybe start to work in the intelligence field, maybe in the military? I mean, how did you end up in this field? It was a natural path, or?
No, I kind of fell into it by accident, to be perfectly honest. After university, I got a job with government and just information processing, sort of management, very non-exciting sort of stuff. But during those months there, I ended up being exposed to more and more of that particular industry, and some people who worked there thought, hey, why don't you come and do this? Because you seem to know about it already. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Because it seemed a hell of a lot more exciting than just writing policies for people. So I sort of fell into it by being sort of grabbed in, and then fell out of it again several years later. As for anyone that wants to get into that, I say don't. It's not something I'd recommend to all. In terms of what books would I recommend in terms of information management, something I was very excited by, and the more I reflect on, the more excited I get, is the book by Tim Ferriss called Tools of the Titans. which what excites me about that is the concept of it. Tim's genius is hacking things, not in terms of computer hacking, but in terms of hacking processes. He's very, very good at it. And however many years ago, he decided, hey, why not just learn from people who are really, really good at stuff? And so he set up his podcast and just interviewed experts on topic X, whatever that is. Then put all that together for his book, Tools of the Titans. Now it's a 600-page tome, which is unmanageable as a pick off the shelf and find what you're looking for type of book. But let's run that through big data. Programs now can read and understand in a similar way, if not better, than humans. So if we took the concept of all the experts in the world on any particular topic have all written down their top 10 tips for whatever it is that they do, and that information is then able to be accessed by a particular app. And so, hey, I need information on XYZ. All of a sudden, we've got the best tips in the world. They're either at our fingertips, they're on our devices, however that interaction happens to be. So that particular concept that Tim Ferriss is going through, he's made it on his book, his podcast, and I'm sure in time someone will think, hey, why don't we do that on a grand scale, throw it in a database, have an app that can interpret it and get the information out for us, and then sell that or give that to people. I think that would be very, very exciting.
Yeah. But I guess there's some challenges with those one-size-fits-all piece of advice, because you've got the context is different, the person is different. It's a little bit like when you're sick and you go online to find a medicine. It is very difficult to really find information because you're not a doctor, right?
Well, that's right. And something that fits in 95% of cases is fantastic for 95% of the people, and probably terrible for the remaining 5%.
Yeah, but you want to minimize if you are the 5% among the 5%, you don't want to take any risk.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think there's any real substitute for human intuition, but intuition needs to be trained and developed over the years, and the more information we can feed into that, the better the gremlins at the back of our brain can come up with a correct answer. And another book I'd highly recommend is called Soonish. By what's the name on it? Weiner Smith, using enough name. This is a book that was written in 2017 and it looks at a number of concepts for what is happening now and will be happening in the near future. It's written in an amusing style and very informal, and so it's easy to read and get into, and hopefully should start the process of thinking for those who read it.
So it's about information and the future of information.
Yes, they look at 10 different topics, but 2 of them are augmented reality and brain-computer interfaces, particularly look at how information is processed and how it can be processed in the future.
With our brain.
Pardon?
With our brain. So directly, the flow of information will come to our brain and we'll use a computer interface.
That's one of the processes that they look at, yes. And I'm not going to do that first. I think I might wait until that's been tested. But I think eventually that will happen. I think enough people will say, I'm going to do it, for it to fail the number of times it needs to fail and then be successful. We haven't evolved. Again, Elon Musk said something about we didn't evolve with data jacks in our heads. True. Okay. We haven't. It's probably a good thing. But if a data jack if there was some way to access all the information that your phone can give you, and to look at that in your eyeballs, or just to understand that in the same way that some deep data understands that information, that would make whoever has that capability able to operate in a way that you and I can only grasp at. They would understand more, know more. It would almost be frightening, but new things often are.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about those topics, very often it's a little bit scary because something is difficult to imagine. It's very difficult to try to project ourselves in 20, 30 years where we have things plugged in our brain and it's almost like we become a different type of human, really.
Yes, I sometimes find it quite scary. My youngest kid is 4 years old. If we're projecting sort of 15, 20 years ahead, how is do we have these brain-computer interfaces? Do we walk around with glasses that give us an augmented view of reality? What will my 24-year-old son life be like? Part of me wants to say, I don't know, it's too much.
Yeah.
But another part of me says, we have to know, we have to explore this. The other day I sat down and watched the first episode of the TV show Mars. I believe it was the SpaceX propaganda piece. It certainly looked like it. They're not recommending, if you're into Mars and stuff, sure, have a watch, but you've probably seen it already if you are. But there was a line in it that I thought fascinating. Just as the team was about to land on Mars and have the 10 minutes of blackout communications with the mission leader mentioned that, hey, we'll see you in 10 minutes time. By the time you're watching this, what's about to happen will already have happened. If it succeeds, fantastic, we'll talk to you in 10 minutes. But if it doesn't, know that we have gone into the darkness so that you can find the light.
Yeah.
So it's very poetic, and that's a great way of looking at it. Yeah. We will make mistakes with how we use these new and emerging technologies. We're going to get it wrong. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I'd rather make mistakes so my 4-year-old can.
Very well said.
I'd rather make the mistakes so someone else's kids can get it right.
I should probably show you my t-shirt. Occupy Mars. I should have given you a warning first.
Right.
So I watch it. Yeah, it's actually half documentary, half propaganda. It's a ritual, but I think it's well made. The education part is pretty interesting. Gregory, thank you very much for your time and for sharing today with us. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Aurelien. It's been great to talk to you. You have a nice day too.